So I'm Becky. I'm born and raised here in Las Vegas. I'm married to, my husband's name is Brian, and we have 3 little boys. We have Nolan, who's 11, Ryder, who's 9, and then Asher, who's 2.5. And he's the real reason why we're here today, is to talk about our journey with Asher. Asher was born at 24.5 weeks. He was a micro-premie, weighing just over 1 pound. So when he was about 5 weeks old, he developed something called necrotizing enterocolitis, which is a bowel infection that causes your bowels to die and perforate. So he was transported from one hospital in town to another hospital for emergency surgery at 5 weeks. He was less than 2 pounds. If you get necrotizing enterocolitis, you have only about a 50% chance of survival. So the fact that he survived that one time was a miracle. But then about 4 weeks later, he experienced it again, and his bowels perforated in about 5 different places. So he underwent another major surgery. So he had a 4.5-month NICU stay, and he was home from the NICU for about 6 weeks. After being home for 6 weeks, he had another medical emergency where part of his intestines perforated again. So we went for emergency ostomy reversal to another local hospital here at the PICU, and then underwent several more emergent surgeries. And during those surgeries, they had to intubate him. Well, the anesthesiologist had a hard time intubating him, so they didn't feel comfortable removing the breathing tube without a pediatric ENT to evaluate his airway. Well, unfortunately, here in Las Vegas, there is no pediatric ENT that specializes in airway disorders. So we were life-flighted out of state to Utah to a hospital that did have one of those specialists available. And ultimately, they decided that he needed a tracheostomy because his airway was about 99% closed. So if they would have removed that breathing tube here in Las Vegas, he would not have survived. So we spent about 5 weeks in the PICU here, and then when he was life-flighted to Utah, we spent 8 weeks in the PICU there, and that was really challenging for our family. I was out there alone with Asher while my husband stayed here with the other kids. So we were separated for 8 weeks, and so it was a really lonely and isolating time for me to go through that and be at the hospital every day just completely by myself with no family help or anything. And you don't have your support system there with you, so you feel very isolated and alone. And then on top of it, the financial aspect of it, it's, you're eating out every day for weeks on end. Sometimes when my family would come up to visit, they'd have to get a hotel room or pay for travel expenses. It definitely put a huge strain on our family, both emotionally and financially. And I missed out on so much by not being able to be here for those 2 months. I missed out on my husband's and my son's birthday. Our dog had to be put to sleep. So it was just, you just miss out on life by not having those resources here available to you. So just a big strain on families. So after we left Utah, it was determined that he was going to need to undergo full airway reconstruction surgery. So I did what most moms would do, and I went to work doing my research, and I wanted to find the best airway surgeon in the U.S. So I found an amazing doctor that was out in Boston. And as you know, we're here in Vegas, so Boston's all the way on the other side of the country. So we traveled out there a few times last year so he could have an initial consultation, initial workup, and then we had to fly back out there again for the actual surgery, and that was a 2-week-long stay. So again, our family was separated, a huge financial strain on our family. My husband has missed so much work. We've transferred care after that to San Diego for follow-ups because one of the doctors in San Diego was a colleague of the doctor who performed his airway surgery. So one of the heartbreaking things that happened during our journey is that he lost his ability to have any voice because of the vocal cord damage. So he's completely mute. So that's definitely going to change the trajectory of his life, and it's going to come with a whole nother set of challenges. The other kind of disappointing thing that happened was when we went for our first follow-up appointment in San Diego, it was determined that his airway had completely closed again, and that was after the big airway reconstruction surgery. So that was absolutely devastating for our family, just because we were at a point where we were running out of treatment options. We didn't know how much more as a family we could undergo these big surgeries and being separated, and then the financial strain that came along with it. So we were traveling back and forth for about 6 months monthly to go have procedures done in San Diego to try to preserve his airway and save the surgery. So they would do something called a balloon dilation, where they put a balloon in his airway, they dilate it to stretch it out, and they do steroid injections in the airway to reduce inflammation. So we did that back to back about 6 times, and ultimately it was successful. So the best news to come out of this is that Asher actually got his tracheostomy tube out last month. So he's about 4 weeks now, trach free. But ultimately he's a fighter and he made it through. He's really stable and healthy, and we're just really appreciative to have been able to get to this point.
What would it mean for a family like yours to have a freestanding children's hospital with those specialists that you need? What would it mean?
Most importantly, it would just give me a sense of relief that if we were in a medical emergency, that there would be the specialist here. So just having that peace of mind that there is somebody here if, God forbid, a medical emergency were to happen. So it would just alleviate a lot of stress, a lot of the financial burden that our family has to carry every time that he has a medical need that arises. And then just the sense of relief that our family could stay together if those things were to happen, that, you know, my other kids would be here and could visit us at the hospital, so we're not having to be separated every time something comes up. I think there's probably over 100 kids in Vegas that have tracheostomy tubes. So all of those kids don't have the proper care that they need. And we only have one pulmonologist here. And for, you know, in addition to the tracheostomy, there's so many other reasons why a child would need to go see a pulmonologist. And they're just spread so thin that they're not able to give you so much undivided attention or individualized care, because they're spread so thin between, you know, having to deal with all of the pediatric patients in Las Vegas for one doctor. So we definitely need more resources. So the things I think that are going well is every time that we have had an emergency, luckily we've had enough skilled doctors and nurses to provide the proper care that he's needed to keep him at least alive. We have the resources to coordinate care out of state if it is necessary. Things that we can improve on, though, definitely more training, I think, for very medically complex children. So there has been a few times where we've had some minor hospital visits, and I don't feel like a lot of nurses are properly trained with hands-on experience to deal with some complex medical kids. So it's really a lot of the parent is in there providing the care for the child, and that can put a huge strain on families, because if you're having a long hospital stay and you're there by yourself as a parent, you need to be able to feel comfortable with the care they're receiving so you can step out and have a break. I know that you've had long hospital stays too, and it really wears on your mental and emotional health. So just having that confidence that if I step out for a few minutes away from the hospital room, that my child's going to be in good hands, that they're properly trained. And I think because we're missing out on those really niche specialty providers, that there's just not the proper training for a lot of nurses out here. So that's definitely, I think, an area of opportunity for Vegas. My wish would be to bring a pediatric ENT here to Vegas that specializes in airway disorders. And I might be a little biased, but for our family, that would be the most impactful thing that could happen in terms of healthcare here in Vegas. And the freestanding children's hospital, because there's so many resources available to families at a children's freestanding hospital versus just a hospital that has a pediatric unit. So freestanding children's hospitals, they usually have more child life services available. When we were in Utah, they even offered child care for the other children. So if you have a child who's in the ICU where kids aren't allowed to be visitors, both parents could still be bedside with the child because they provided the child care for you. So just those extra resources that we miss out on by not having a freestanding children's hospital.